Bonnie, you're good to go.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening. I call to order this regular meeting of the Minnehaha County Planning Commission. And as a courtesy to everyone here tonight, please make sure that all cell phones have been silenced. Please also note that tonight's Planning Commission meeting will be rebroadcast via CityLink and posted on the www.minnehahacounty.org site for viewing by the general public. This is the first meeting of the new year, and I do want to welcome a new commissioner, or actually a county commissioner, Joe Kipley. We welcome you.
Yes.
And
Thank
we
you,
also
Bonnie.
want you to know that if you have any questions, either for staff or for the audience, for the petitioner, please feel free to ask them.
Outstanding. Yeah, I've got Jeff Barth didn't get too far. So, I keep him within arm's length for any of my questions, but thanks, Bonnie.
As tonight is the first meeting of 2023, we will begin with the selection of the chairperson and the vice chairperson. Are there any nominations for the chairperson?
I nominate Bonnie Duffy.
I'll second.
I have a motion second to nominate Bonnie Duffy for chairperson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Thank you. Are there any nominations for the vice chairperson?
I nominate Becky Randall.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to appoint, to nominate Becky Randall as vice chairperson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now that the officers have been selected, we will move on to the regular meetings, beginning with the Joint Planning Commission meeting with Minnehaha County and the City of Sioux Falls. To continue, I will need a motion to recess the Minnehaha County Planning Commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recess this part of the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now I call to order this regular joint meeting of the Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls Planning Commission. And I have already voiced a few introductory comments, so I'm going to move on from that. The two planning commissions work together on land use and zoning matters within the rural areas surrounding the city. The area is displayed on the screen. When this joint hearing is completed, the joint Sioux Falls and County Planning Commission will adjourn, and the next regular business meeting will begin to consider items beyond the joint zoning jurisdiction with Sioux Falls. Any final action taking on the conditional use permit applications tonight will take effect 5 working days following this meeting unless a written appeal of the Planning Commission's decision is filed in the Planning Office by Monday, January 30th at 5 p.m. In the event of an appeal, the decision will be referred to the Joint County Commission and City Council for a hearing on Tuesday, February 28th at or after 5 p.m. The affected parties will be notified of the meeting date. Joint meetings of the County Commission and the Sioux Falls City Council are held at Carnegie Town Hall, and that is located at 235 West 10th Street. First on the agenda is public input. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda?
For the record, this has to be within that section of the county.
I'm guessing most will want to know that the Minnehaha County meeting's after this, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm going to ask one more time. I was under the understanding that maybe somebody was going to be here for public input.
For the county.
Oh, for the county, okay. Thanks, John. We'll move on. At this time, the Planning Commission will consider the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are perceived to be non-controversial and meet all of the requirements of the codes and regulations. The consent agenda will be acted on in one motion with no public hearing on the items unless a member of the public, the commission, or staff requests the item to be removed from the consent agenda. The minutes from the November 28th, 2022 meeting are included in the consent agenda. Next, I will read each item on the consent agenda and ask if there are any issues or comments from the Planning Commission or the audience. If any member of the Planning Commission or the audience would like to be heard on the item, please raise your hand and the item will be moved to the regular agenda to allow you to address the commission later in the meeting. Any other items remaining on the consent agenda will be approved by the Planning Commission with the conditions recommended by staff. Item number 1 is the approval of the minutes of the November 28th, 2022 meeting. Item number 2 is conditional use permit 23-01 to exceed 2,400 square feet of accessory building space requesting 3,000 square feet on the property legally described as Tract 1B, Howard Addition, the Southwest Quarter, Section 35, Township 102 North, Range 50 West. That is in Benton Township. Petitioner and landowner is Dan and Brenda Pettit. They live at 6800 West Benson Road. Item number 3 is conditional use permit 23-05 to transfer one building eligibility from the northwest quarter, the northeast quarter, within the north half. The north half, there is an exception of H-1 and 2, end of exception, to Tract 2, Lundstra's Addition, southeast quarter, northeast quarter, all in Section 18, Township 102 North, Range 48 West. That is in Brandon Township. Petitioner and landowner is David Lundstra. That is located 2.5 miles northeast of Sioux Falls. Item number 4 is conditional use permit 23-06 to allow a bed and breakfast establishment on the property legally described as Lot 8, Block 1, Harvard, Alguires, First Edition to Ellis, Township 101 North, Range 50 West. That is in Wayne Township. The petitioner is Daniel Bruns. Property owner is Doug Planker. That is located at 1803 North Ellis Road.
You want me to speak up now? I think on this one, I'd like to move it to the regular agenda.
Okay, item number 4 will be removed to the regular agenda. We'll move on to item number 5 is conditional use permit 23-07 to exceed 3,600 square feet of accessory building space requesting 7,068 square feet on the property legally described as Tract 1, Lacey's Addition, Northeast Quarter, Southeast Quarter, Section 6, Township 101 North, Range 48 West. That is located in Split Rock Township. Petitioner and property owner is Monty Albertson. Location, 2901 North 6 Mile Road.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the consent agenda with the removal of item 4 to the regular agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve on the county side, items 1, 2, 3, and 5. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? That passes on the county side.
All right, on the city side, do I have a motion to approve the agenda, moving item number 4 to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. If your item has been approved, you are free to go. Okay, item number 4 has been removed to the regular agenda. Mason, do you want to?
So as explained by the chair, item number 4, conditional use permit 2306, is to allow a bed and breakfast establishment. The petitioner is requesting to operate a short-term rental, which in this case is being defined as a bed and breakfast establishment out of the existing home on the property. And the joint zoning ordinance for the city and the county currently classifies such a use as a bed and breakfast. The petitioner has submitted a narrative for the request, which explains the proposed number and the type of guests allowed within the bed and breakfast, as well as their plans for monitoring the property. The petitioner also explains that they will equip the property with security cameras, which will allow them to constantly monitor the people coming and going and the group sizes of the groups that will be staying at the bed and breakfast. On January 11th, staff did conduct a site visit of this property, and it is located on North Ellis Road in the northern portion of the unincorporated Ellis. There are approximately 30 homes in this area on similar sized lots, which are almost all are developed into single-family dwellings. Additionally, the proposed use of a short-term rental within an existing dwelling should not have a major impact on the surrounding area, given that it is similar to the use of a traditional single-family dwelling. And finally, this request, since it is in with joint jurisdiction of the city of Sioux Falls, it was sent to the city planning staff, and they did not have any additional comments above what the county comments are. So for each conditional use permit, we look at 6 criteria. The first one is the effect upon the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for uses already permitted. As explained, the property is located in the unincorporated residential subdivision of Ellis. Short-term rentals are fairly compatible with residential subdivisions because traffic is low and the number of guests are limited. Number 2 is that the effect upon the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding vacant property for use is predominant in the area. Again, there are very few undeveloped lots in Ellis, and most of the new development in the area will include additions to or replacements of the single-family dwellings. Also, as stated, a bed and breakfast operates similar to a traditional conventional single-family dwelling, and if the petitioner decides to stop operating the bed and breakfast, it's easily converted back into just a normal one-family, single-family dwelling. Number 3, that utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities are provided. The property does have access off of North Ellis Road, and given that it is already developed with a single-family dwelling, all the necessary utilities, such as off-street parking, water, sewer, are all provided already. Number 4, that the off-street parking and loading requirements are met. Given that there are 5 bedrooms, there should be at least a minimum of 5 off-street parking spaces provided. In the narrative, the petitioner explained that there will be at least 6 indoor parking spaces between the 2 garages, and there will be plenty of other outdoor off-street parking on the property for the proposed number of guests. Number 5 is that measures are taken to control offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting, so that none of these will constitute a nuisance. The petitioner has explained that they will have strict quiet hours from 10:30 p.m. to 6 a.m., and that will be a condition of approval for this permit, and that they will be constantly monitoring the property through the installed security cameras where they can monitor the coming and going of the group sizes as well as noise if there are potential noise nuisances that are happening on the property. Additionally, the petitioner will have the ability to screen any potential guests before approval is given, which will also limit any potential nuisances that could arise from the bed and breakfast. Number 6, that the health, safety, general welfare of the public and the comprehensive plan. Given that the proposed use is similar to a conventional dwelling, the effect on the public should be minimal. Also, in order to protect the guests, carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors should be installed according to the building code adopted by Minnehaha County, and the petitioner should keep a list of all guests and provide that to law enforcement if needed. With that, staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit 2306 with 8 conditions, and I'll just go over some site pictures here quickly. So this is looking at the front of the property, at the front deck, and you can see where I'm standing would be about 2 off-street parking spaces, and then inside of that garage would be another 2 spaces. This is looking to the east, or to the north side of the building, excuse me, and that is additional parking between the neighboring fence and the dwelling there, and then there's the gate between the front yard and the backyard, and as you can see, that other detached accessory building would be additional off-street parking. And then this is just a picture of the backyard just to see how the backyards are fenced off between this property and the property to the north and south. And then this is just looking more to the north, that there's a privacy fence there between that property and the property to the north. And then here's just looking back towards the access onto North Ellis, just to see that the driveway is fairly large and would be able to accommodate quite a bit of off-street parking. And then here's just a couple of pictures looking to the north along the properties to the north, the neighboring property to the north, and then the neighboring properties to the south. And then with that, I'll go back up to the aerial picture. And if you would like me to read the 8 conditions, I can. Otherwise, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for him?
I have a question. It may or may not relate to conditions, but this is kind of an example of rules too. The definition for bed and breakfast is the accommodation may stay up to 14 consecutive days. And in the applicant's narrative, they indicate their goal is to host longer stays of 14 to 90 days. I just wondered if you spoke to the applicant about that or.
Sure. I have not specifically spoken about those longer stays, but if, I guess, the way that the ordinance is written, if the rate stays daily after those, if they have longer stays, but the rate is daily, that still technically meets the definition of our ordinance. If they decide to do that, but I have not specifically talked if that's a big part of their plan, if they plan on doing those 15 to 90 day stays more often, shorter stays. I don't know which one's more prevalent.
Any other questions for him? Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward and state your name and address, please?
Daniel Bruns, 3004 West 90th Street, Sioux Falls. Would you like me to speak to that?
Pardon me?
Would you like me to speak to the day length stay?
Sure.
So our client, I'm representing Doug Quaker. Our client prefers the longer stays, but to maximize occupancy, to be able to do less than 14 days according to the bed and breakfast ordinance would be ideal. So his ideal is more midterm, long-term, but this would give us the ability to do like weekenders or like for families that are getting together in the summer. So this just gives us the flexibility. And this is Billy Schlatter, our property host.
Yeah, just I was one that was talking with Doug. Ideally, we're looking for nurses, people that work at Sanford, and all that is the ideal clients that we're there. Find a couple of nurses that are sharing, and they can split up the property to be able to have somewhere to live outside of a hotel room or a smaller space of a room. So.
Anyone have any questions for them?
I guess I would have a question. So is this just to be in compliances while you're doing this, or?
Yeah, it just gives us the flexibility to do any kind of stay. Where it's written right now is anything less than 14 days, we wouldn't be able to do that, and to maintain the kind of occupancy that the property owner needs to make this work, that is a lot better.
Okay. And I guess, so is a bed and breakfast what you're wanting to do, or is more a short-term rental?
It's a short-term rental,
Okay.
but having the opportunity to do all sorts helps you maximize, like, our client's preference is long-term, but for a better use of the space, we want to be able to use it for whatever the market gives us access to. In the winter, that's long-term. In the summer, it's short-term.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, anyone else have any questions for him? I guess not at this time. Thank you. Anyone in the audience care to address this item? Please step forward and state your name and address.
You're right up there.
Podium, please.
Terry Melima, and I live at 1804 North Alguire, so I'd be the backyard neighbor. And part of my concern is, am I gonna have a party every weekend of different people? There's only a 4-foot chain link fence, so part of me would help for condition of them putting up a 6-foot privacy fence at least, if we're gonna have a lot of different people coming through, and I don't get a solid backyard neighbor anymore. Is actually all I really wanna address.
Thank you. Would you like to address that, sir? Yeah. Okay.
So, do I say my name again?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, Daniel Bruns, 3004 West 90th Street. again, our client's primary, he doesn't want much noise, much trouble. I would say his preference would be we have people that are there 3 months at a time. But as we represent him in the property management side, it doesn't really make sense for the use of the property to limit it to that. So I get your concern, and I can't speak in his behalf on what he'd agree to. But I think it'd be unnecessary with the amount of surveillance that we're offering. If there's any loud nuisance, one of our platforms, if there are any sort of like rambunctious gathering, that's grounds for them for their contract to be terminated. So a lot of these things are already self-managed. I would imagine if that became a problem in the future, that there would be something that have to be done. But in general, that kind of behavior, we screen guests for those kind of our client wants nothing to do with loud parties or gatherings. Mostly just wants long-term professional people that are there. So I think that would be unnecessary based on knowing my client's preferences. I guess that's all I can speak to. We have camera monitors, and we'd be willing to even install noise monitors if that would ensure the neighbor of any nuisance. So.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for him? Anybody else in the audience care to address this? Okay, I guess I'll close the floor. Commissioners? Go ahead.
I want to make a comment just because I pulled it. So the reason why I pulled it is I just basically, since we're talking about a bed and breakfast and a short-term rental, I think there's two different definitions there. And that's why I wanted to kind of pull that, since we have another one that was already on the consent agenda. I want them both to be treated equal and go through the same process. But I think what us as a joint commission needs to figure out, what the definition is of a short-term rental. Really before we can do much, because I think there is totally two different things here, but that's why I pulled that.
I agree.
Let's see here.
Madam Chair, could we ask another question of staff, and maybe Scott can help us, because that's another one of the awkward pieces here, is that we are considering some of those definitions later on in the county meeting, where hopefully we'll modernize some of our ordinances and get this on a path. I know we're kind of working under the bed and breakfast and trying to make this work, and I appreciate Scott and staff trying to make do with what we have in ordinance, and we're trying to follow the rules as we see them. I don't know if Scott or Mason want to speak to that general concern and issues of definition. I think the bed and breakfast definitions have served us okay, but we've kind of seen that maybe we need to bring some things up to date with Airbnb and VRBO modern world that we're living in. But Scott, any general comments on those definitions?
You're exactly correct, Commissioner Kipley. This is something that we have been working on. We are trying to make this accommodate that use by calling it a bed and breakfast. Is it ideally a bed and breakfast? No. So we are evaluating and we're looking at how we are going to deal with that. We have a discussion at the end of the county agenda, a proposed ordinance amendment. I have reached out to a number of people in the community, the Sioux Empire Home Builders, different people that were here at the November meeting that expressed interest. And I have reached out to some people. If you remember the Wall Lake Airbnb, we had some neighbors there. I've solicited comments from them because I wanted to sort of get an idea of both sides. So it is something that we're discussing. And to lay this out for you, what your options might be, if you're not comfortable with calling this a bed and breakfast, then you can continue this for 4 to 6 months, because it will take at least 90 days for an ordinance amendment to work its way through the system. So if you want, or you can approve it as a bed and breakfast and we move forward as we have with other properties throughout the county. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, that's helpful, Scott. Madam Chair, my comment would be, and I appreciate my colleague Larry pulling this just for the sake of the conversation, because I think this is helpful to get some cards on the table here. I tend to think this one, just taking this one on its own merits, is fairly straightforward, and I would lean towards approving. And under either definition, I think what you're pointing out to us, though, is that we're making the petitioner jump through a few extra hoops. I think Mason mentioned things like having to technically post it as a daily rate rather than a 90-day short-term rental. So having to jump through a few hoops that just aren't really meshing with our definitions. But that is a case in point that will help us update those definitions and say, hey, maybe some of these that we've seen come through recently are more short-term rentals. They should be defined this way, and we shouldn't make petitioners have to classify their daily rate, monthly rate, weekend rate, just to we're kind of reverse engineering it as a bed and breakfast. And so I get that point, but I think on the merits of what the petitioner is bringing forward, I see it as fairly non-controversial and something we'll want to continue to keep an eye on as this industry keeps sprouting up, but I think it meets our definitions as we would see fit, and I look forward to any other further discussion before I'd make a motion.
Yeah, no, just the biggest thing is that, is if we waited, is there going to be an issue on that? I mean, if we were to wait the 4 months, I mean, we haven't had a problem with it so far. Why don't we figure out what the definition is, and that way we can do it the right way instead of just trying to put a Band-Aid on it, is basically how my thought process is, because to me, it's not a bed and breakfast, to be honest with you. That doesn't fit the criteria. But I mean, I know we've proved some in the past, and I know the county has proved some in the past too, but I just don't think that it fits, and I don't want something to happen where they are out of compliance because they're falling into something that they don't want to be, if that makes sense. And I think it's more of our problem than their problem.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I welcome any of my colleagues' thoughts. I guess my response would be just I don't want to penalize this petitioner for basically falling in this accident of time where we're starting to consider modernization that I think would actually only benefit the petitioner to get some of those definitions probably more into their favor. So I'm leaning again towards approval on this one, but any other
Any other
comments?
commissioners
Otherwise,
have any comments? Mike?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may. I guess not to piggyback or kind of reiterate the same thing, but I do agree. I mean, it is a timing issue. If we were looking at this, say, for another 2 months, 6 months, a year, the fact that the petitioner came here and is compliant with what we, consider compliance with the definition today, or in compliance with the precedent that's already been set, I sure hate to penalize the petitioner 4 months, 6 months, simply because we haven't been able to have that definition modernized yet. So I think we're having to look at what the definition is today, and I think that they're in compliance with that. So I guess I would agree. I think that we should approve this permit.
Any other comments, commissioners?
I agree. They've said it well.
I'd move approval on the county side then.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion on the county side and a second to approve conditional use permit 2306 to allow that bed and breakfast. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on the county side.
All right, on the city side, do I have a motion for approval? For discussion, if nothing else.
Make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
And I just mainly wanted to bring up that so we can start that discussion, because having something not in compliance is not cool either way, because, they're basically wanting to do something. Well, we can come after them for, not being in compliance. So it's really gray is basically the best way. And I think that having a conversation of, I won't be here for the next meeting for the Minnehaha part of it for the short-term rental, but I just wanted to throw out there right now so that you can hear some stuff that we've been talking to Kurt Soll about, because he's mainly the one on the Sioux Falls side that is basically helping with the short-term rentals. And we had an HBA meeting here about a week or two ago that we, he was nice enough and came head on to talk to us about our concerns. Some of the stuff we talked about is Sioux Falls adding it to a bid tax. So basically just treat it equal with basically hotels, which is pretty fair. And also too, keeping in compliance of, a hotel has certain parking requirements where a house has certain parking requirements. One thing that we did talk about was a formal complaint process where basically it would be like a hearing instead of something that's done, behind closed doors. So that basically if there's an issue, people can come and talk about it. One thing that we also talked about is, with every rental that's in Sioux Falls, it's supposed to be registered. There's a form that you fill out to make it a rental so that they have the emergency contact if they need it. That's something that, we talked about that in depth. We also talked about, because they've had some problems where reaching out to national property management companies where they can't get a hold of them. So we did, kind of talk about if, I'm probably going to get shot in the head for this, but since that's my industry, but having where a South Dakota licensed property management company manages those properties if it's not managed by the owner. And then definition of short-term rentals, that's basically pretty much what we've came down to is we kind of came in agreement almost with that. So, but everything could change in 3 to 4 months or whenever the city attorneys start talking about it. But I just wanted to throw that stuff out there since I won't be here at the next meeting. But just wanted to have that conversation so that we can figure out how to make it fair and have a process that's the same for everyone, so.
Other comments, commissioners?
I have one. I just would like to get some direction on the part of staff about where they see this coming together. Are we looking ahead to something where you feel this will help manage the responsibilities we have as commissioners?
Fletcher Laycock, urban planner, City of Sioux Falls. So this is a topic, short-term rentals, that planning staff is beginning to look into. We're starting to do the background research. We're not anywhere near moving forward with enforcement. I think this, yes, it sandwiches it into a bed and breakfast, which isn't exactly what it is, but it's the best way we can work to get it done in this situation. In the city, it would probably also, as a bed and breakfast, would also be a conditional use permit. So that's kind of the way we looked at it from that perspective, so.
Okay, thanks.
I guess one thing I'll throw out there too is for this joint council, if something were to happen, who actually, if there's a nuisance, who takes care of that would be also something for conversation to look at too, so. But I will vote in favor of this just to basically get it done for today, so.
Other comments?
Chair, the way I look at it, I think this works fairly well because it keeps it in compliance with the recent thinking on it. And yes, it's maybe a little bit jumping the gun of the new legislation, which I think is great that that's being considered now. The other thing I think we forget about conditional use permits is they travel with the owner. So if this property is ever sold or transferred or otherwise, it defaults to not having a conditional use permit remaining on the property. Is that correct? That is not true. It stays with the property. Okay.
Unless otherwise, but sometimes you can specify that in the conditions, but unless it's specified, it stays with the property.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
All right, other comments before I call for a vote?
And that motion was with the 8 conditions too. I don't know if that's what you guys voted on. Okay.
All right. All those in favor, please say yes, and those opposed, please say no.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you. So then we'll move on to the other item on the regular agenda is item number 6, conditional use permit, 23-04, to allow a bed and breakfast establishment on the property legally described as Track 3, Andes Acres, the North Quarter, Southwest Quarter, Section 23, Township 102 North, Range 49 West. That is in Mapleton Township. Petitioner is Tyler Shieldrest. He's also the property owner. Location is 47655 Slip Up Creek Road. Kevin?
Good evening. I'm Kevin Hookman, County Planning Department. And slight correction, it's 47644 as shown on the screen here, Slip Up Creek Road. So this property is located in a rural subdivision, located approximately a mile north of the city of Sioux Falls. And the petitioner is requesting to utilize a single-family dwelling for a short-term rental, and in the narrative, and to have special events. The zoning ordinance requires a conditional use permit as bed and breakfast, as we kind of went through that definition. But there is no listed uses in the ordinance in the ag district for special events. And I have the definition included in the staff report. This item was first brought to the attention to planning staff by the neighboring property owners who saw the property being advertised online and through a news article. When staff contacted the property owner regarding the requirement for a conditional use permit, the property owner applied for the conditional use permit right away. The joint zoning ordinance does allow for a bed and breakfast establishment. And I'll go over some of the kind of conditional use permit criteria for this specific property. One, the effect upon the use and enjoyment of the other properties in immediate vicinity for the uses already permitted and upon the property values in the immediate vicinity. I will begin this one is that this is located in a subdivision. In the last few bed and breakfast establishments have had a guest limit of 3 guests per bedroom. This house has 6 bedrooms, and as we go through this permit, you'll see that's going to be the primary limiting factor of the use of this property to allow the property up to 18 people for this bed and breakfast establishment. And this is there to keep it relatively safe and compatible with the single-family dwelling, and also to limit gatherings and special events on the property as how the advertised perception is for the property. One advantage of the bed and breakfast, as I note, is that it can easily be converted back into a single-family dwelling if the property owner chooses to do that. And number 2, the effect upon the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant properties for uses predominant in the area. This property is pretty well developed, this neighborhood, and this area is in the Tier 3 of the annexation area for the city, so it'll be a while before annexation happens. So any changes here will not likely affect future developments. Number 3, utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities are provided. This property is already existing, so no new utilities will be needed. I will comment that the property has an on-site wastewater disposal system designed for a single-family dwelling with 600 gallons of water per day usage. And based on 18 people in the house, that may not be enough size for the septic system. Number 4, the off-street parking and loading requirements are met. There's a large concrete driveway on the property, and this is enough to accommodate up to 6 cars or 6 vehicles without blocking other vehicles. That's 1 parking space per bedroom. And I will note that we will not allow on-street parking at any time on the property. Number 5, the measures are taken to control offensive odor, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting, inclusive of light of signs, so that none of these will constitute a nuisance. Of these nuisances, the greatest potential is noise from rowdy guests, as we heard that concern. And this property is a little bit unique in that it will be operated in conjunction with the Laurel Ridge Barn, which will likely mean that guests will be arriving after events on the weekends, after midnight, and there may be more propensity for activities outside or otherwise property owner narrative made no such reference to house rules or anything like that. That could be utilized, such as noise monitors and cameras, to limit noise on the property. Number 6, the health, safety, and general welfare of the public and comprehensive plan. Bed and breakfast should have minimal effect on the public. It does allow the property owners to earn income and guests to take advantage of larger establishments. Staff would like to note that the guests should be protected by having functioning smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, and that the neighbors should be, that there should be a list of those who attend available for law enforcement if needed. Go over a few photos of the property. So this is the property from the driveway location. Looking up at it and looking kind of towards the neighboring property owner to the west. And then this would be one looking to the east. So it is a pretty tight neighborhood. The property is about 3/4 of an acre in size. And this would be the parking area. You have the 3 garage stalls. There's parking behind the garage, a little bit there, some concrete. And then you have the detached garage to the right. And then this would be looking directly south of the property to the road, and kind of off to the Laurel Ridge Barn, the wedding event center. I'll bring it back to the site plan. Or maybe here. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit with 9 conditions. And I will be available for any questions.
Any questions for him?
I do have a
Larry?
question. So on the last one, did we have anything on the maximum guests that they could have? I'm trying, was it 3 per bedroom?
Yes, the last one was 3 per bedroom, so since there was 5 bedrooms at the last one, it was 15 on the previous permit, so same, just one less bedroom.
And there's how many bedrooms in this one?
There are 6 bedrooms in this house.
So basically, if we follow the same math, it'd be 18, correct?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Actually, 2. The first one is, I didn't see where you ever said no about special events. Now, maybe I didn't read all the documents correctly, but in following your emails, it didn't ever say no special events. And on the last submission from the applicant, it reads that they will have special events. So if that's the application, you know, we can't approve that if it includes special events, can we?
So as I pointed out in the beginning of the staff report, there is no definition for special events in the ag zoning district. We would not approve this as an event venue. I guess we're trying to walk that line, and one thinking that if you have 18 people at a house, it is likely that there's an event because 18 people are gathering. So it is probably that if 18 people show up and have a birthday party, we don't want to be to the point where the neighbors are saying they're having a birthday party and that's a special event. So we're limiting to 18 people, and if they spontaneously have a birthday party or a gathering, then that's going to be the people who rent the house.
Okay.
So, yeah, if he is going to be using it as a special event, and if you feel that he's wanting to use it as an event center, then maybe the best option would be to deny the permit.
Okay, just a second question, and kind of going to the things that you lifted up in the report with regards to the wastewater. Is that an analysis that is done on every applicant? It wasn't brought up on the previous applicant, so I assume that was okay, or?
Well, as you noticed, there also wasn't any conditions on it. Ultimately, the wastewater analysis was in part because we had the permit data on the wastewater. And if it ultimately is a problem, it's going to be his basement that's going to be full of wastewater. So that's where he should be careful, I guess, in allowing too many guests in the property.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
I guess I would have a question for Fletcher. There's a place that I know that's just south of Lake the Rain that I think is also a bed and breakfast that does do events. Does that fall into bed and breakfast? Maybe they don't do it the right way.
I'm not aware of that bed and breakfast. I'm sure they went through a conditional use permit. This specifically, it is not identified, special events are not identified as a conditional or permitted use in the agriculture district. So I think looking at this, it was trying to separate that out. I think they would certainly be, able to say that this conditional, one of the conditions is this conditional use permit is not approving any special events.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for him? Guess not at this time. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward and state your name and address?
Hello, Tyler. Tyler Childress, landowner here. Yeah, our original goal was to have a 16-person option for overnight accommodations. There's different bedrooms that, when we bought it, it was fully furnished. It was the intention of the previous landowner to do the same thing, an Airbnb, a VRBO. It leads itself well to our other business for overnight accommodations to make sure they get home safely and that type of thing. The nine restrictions are things that we agree with, that make sense. Yeah, I guess I would ask for any questions you have. We're just looking to provide an option. We have other rental houses that are normal 12 months, so we know how to operate them. This particular is under an LLC for protection. Just make sure we're doing everything on code with an EIN and it's all set up properly with the state. Some of the restrictions here as far as Department of Health, we're already aware of all that lodging license and understand the process to go through for that. Yeah, any questions you may have for me?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Joe.
what do you anticipate your average guests to be in length of stay, things like that?
1 to 3 nights would be probably the typical. I would guess somewhere in that range. We're considering looking at the other Airbnbs, and some have 3-night minimums. So we're not sure if that's our direction, but I don't think we'd see, 10 days, 12 days. That's kind of not the market we're going after.
Do you anticipate basically a synergy between the wedding event business and this being wedding guests essentially that are staying overnight related to the wedding event?
Sorry, that was our first initial intention of that, but we think the market's a little bit more greater than that. We think some guests they want just a 1-night option and not a 3-night option, and we're not sure we want that for some of our wedding guests. The house is very beautiful. It's well furnished. It's got a full kitchen upstairs, full kitchen downstairs. It's like a lot of Airbnbs, such in Lead and Deadwood, around Terry Peak and that kind of stuff. There's developments happening in those markets that are brand new houses. We went out and stayed in one to make sure we understood how it looked, how, what the process was and the fees and all that kind of, so we understood that. But yeah, I see some weddings events. The check-in time, our goal was like 2 p.m., checkout time, 10 a.m. It's a 2.5-year-old house, very well built. We'll screen every client to make sure that we have good clients that take care of it with security deposits to make sure it's well taken care of and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Any other questions for him?
Madam Chair, I have 2 questions. What about quiet hours and/or cameras to monitor the premises?
Yeah, we got our bid already from a camera company, and we were trying to decide if outside cameras is the best option or do we want inside cameras. And there's some privacy things that we have to look at just to make sure we understand. Some places have them in the common areas, some have them just outside. I think more of the outside option is kind of more what we're thinking. Just to understand how many guests are coming in, who's coming in, what hours, that kind of thing. We're also anticipating putting in like little lock codes that hook to the internet so we can kind of see which users are coming in and when. We know when the doors are being moved and that kind of thing, just from a logistic and safety standpoint.
And quiet hours?
Yeah, quiet hours, we see, I mean, like a normal house. We're in a residential area. We want to be kind to our neighbors. You know, my kids are in bed by 9 o'clock at night. I would say sometime around 10 o'clock would be acceptable for us. We hadn't really set that because we didn't really understand what was needed by the neighbors to be a good neighbor and such, but we thought more 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. is what we were thinking. Yeah, and our goal is to not have a party house. We want to have a good evening for mom, for grandma, for grandpa. We want to have places where they can stay and be amongst each other and create memories together.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair. Yeah, do you have any concerns about the water usage in the sewage system?
No, I mean, we have the ability to mitigate certain things if we feel that's, and put certain requirements on. The entire facility is very new, and we've already monitors on the septic system that show how much water is going through there. We know the water usage from Minnehaha County, how much is coming through. The family prior to us had a large family, had grandma living there, had other Jehovah's Witness type people living there. The use isn't really changing. We're just, so they had a large family. They had mom, dad, grandma, 4 kids. I mean, they had 12 to 14 there all the time. And so we understand the usage, talk to previous owners. It's a very new process. There's 2 hot water heaters inside there. It's a normal house. Well, we have a 6-bedroom house at our current house, and we don't ever get near that number. So no, I don't see that.
Any other questions for him? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that cares to address this item? Please step forward and state your name and address.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Casey Olivier. I'm an attorney here in Sioux Falls. I represent some of the landowners that are affected by this. My work address is 6210 Southland Crest Avenue here in Sioux Falls. I want to start tonight by discussing South Dakota Supreme Court case law when we're looking at a conditional use permit that specifically applies to the public interest prong. The South Dakota Supreme Court mandates that one of the things you have to consider is if there is if literal enforcement of the conditions on this property would cause undue hardship on the other landowners. The one thing that was not disclosed to this commission is there's restrictive covenants on this property that state it shall only be used as a residential property. So what happens if a conditional use permit is granted and this goes forward, all of the landowners are forced to bear the legal process to go in and get an injunction to stop this. That not only impacts the landowners, it impacts the renters, and it impacts the rest of the community. Another issue that we've got is, and that's an element the South Dakota Supreme Court has recommended the commission consider. Another issue is the representations that have been made to this commission do not adequately represent what has been advertised online, what has been said in Kello interviews, and what is currently being advertised on the website. It is being advertised as the day of wedding, actual weddings, bachelor pads, bachelorette parties, bachelor parties, church camps, Boy Scout retreats, Girl Scout retreats. So it's not just being used as grandma and grandpa want to make some memories the night before a wedding. This is a true event venue. And if you look at the closeness between the homes and you think that they will be walking from the Laurel Ridge barn into this home after being served alcohol at all hours of the night. Unlike the previous landowner that came in and talked about the security measures he was going to take, there's no plan here. Maybe it'll be inside, maybe it'll be outside. What is the enforcement here? So that puts the burden on the neighboring landowners to call law enforcement, to call the zoning commission, or if you have unruly people outside, matters get taken into people's own hands. It creates a danger to the community, it creates a burden, and it creates a hardship that is paramount to the consideration on the first prong. And I don't think that that was adequately set forth in the original recommendation to this property. I do take into consideration that when we're looking at this, that there is no definition for special events, but that's exactly what this is. This isn't a bed and breakfast where people come, they maybe stay, they eat, they leave. This is an event venue. and it's advertised as an event venue, and it's been used as an event venue prior to this application even being filed. We would ask that if the commission is going to move forward, that there be even further recommendations, that this comply with all laws and ordinances, that this comply with all contractual agreements and covenants that run with the land, that they comply with considerations of who monitors who's drinking outside, underage drinking, people walking around, going to wedding venues. How do we monitor that? How do you monitor who's there? Does that fall on the landowners around them to call? There's no plan by this applicant. So we would ask respectfully on behalf of the landowners surrounding this area and under the case law by the South Dakota Supreme Court that this petition be denied.
Anyone else in the audience care to speak to this item? Step forward and state your name and address.
My name is John Beck, and this is my wife Tina Beck. We live at 47645 Sorrel Street. We're in the
If you were to
house directly
change
to the north.
If you were to switch to the view before, the land view, we can show you exactly where our house is. Do you see the red square? We are directly above that. The only thing separating our property from his is a grass road called Weidenbach Street. So, I'm going to say, how many of you purchased your house based on location? Did you purchase a house near a busy road or a quiet road? Did you purchase a place near businesses or one that you knew would have businesses going up around it? Did you buy one that was in a peaceful, quiet neighborhood? We bought our property because it was and still is outside city limits, in the country where we have peace and quiet. Our property butts up to the north end of it with that street in between. We are against this conditional use permit because it goes against our tight-knit neighborhood. Our neighbors watch out for each other. Our neighborhood really truly cares about each and every one of our neighbors. We mow for each other, we remove snow for each other. As Childress has shown us in the past, he is not that type of neighbor that would fit in with our neighborhood. We have lived here for 28 years. I've loved the peace and quiet that we get to enjoy. We raised our 3 children out there and hope to have our grandchildren be able to play in the same yard that our kids did. By allowing the conditional use permit, you'll be destroying and negatively affecting our neighborhood. I'll no longer have neighbors to the south. I will have different strangers, partygoers, multiple days of the week. Our tight-knit neighborhood will no longer feel safe when we have different people staying at that party house every night. We won't know anything about our neighbors for the night. We aren't against a new neighbor. We're against multiple strangers. Most people that live out there have lived there 10+ years. And I've talked to multiple realtors who have told me that having this business in our neighborhood will most likely affect our property values, our ability to sell our own homes, and it will certainly change the impression of the neighborhood. We've worked very hard to have a nice neighborhood. And when we met about the barn here years ago, I remember Childress saying, I will have as much at stake as all of you. We plan on building our house out here too. It will affect us just as much as it affects you. He hasn't built his family house out there. He hasn't built his family house anywhere near there. He knew exactly what he was doing when he advertised his new event center in December of 2022. He then called Kellerland to promote his violation of the ordinance. He knew the proper channels to go through to legally do something, but he decided to sneak through without any concern for others. As you've heard, his website still promotes weddings, even though he's been told he can't have them out there. And as per the final email from Childress to Kevin at 2:36 p.m. on December 20th, Childress states, yes, we plan to hold special events between 8 a.m. to 12 midnight. He lists bachelor pad, loud, obnoxious parties is what's going to happen. He lists after the wedding. Well, if the weddings get done at midnight, people aren't going to show up to that house until midnight or after. He and his business would not be a good fit for our neighborhood. He has shown us that he isn't the type to look out for his neighbors like we all do. He's not been concerned with what his barn has done to any of the neighbors, yet he will try to sweet talk everyone tonight, tell us everything we want to hear. The only thing we want to hear is that he will not be allowed to operate this business in our neighborhood. And to prove what sort of a neighbor he will be, On January 4th, 2023, somewhere between 10:30 and 11 at night, he decided that he should plow the driveway. So the bright lights from his pickup shone in my second-story bedroom while he plowed his driveway. He revved his engine. He had no concern for the noise that he made with the neighbors at 11 at night. His outside lights are on all the time. They shine in our windows. Is he really going to comply?
I had a couple other things to add or repeat that Tina said. As mentioned by Ms. Oliver, there is a covenant that runs with the land in the neighborhood out there in Andy's Acres, that it's for residential purposes only. And I'm not sure how your definition works with residential use only and the bed and breakfast, or if he's applying for an event center. I'm really confused on that now, but the covenant clearly states that it's for residential use only, and I don't think a bed and breakfast counts for that. A couple other items. He's still advertising this as being a event center on his website, on that house's website, and on his Laurel Ridge website, that he could have parties there. Again, I don't know if that's his intent or if he's just applying for a bed and breakfast. Before he applied for this permit, before we saw it on Kello land, he already had people who were gonna rent it. And my understanding that that he's breaking the law there on advertising for a bed and breakfast when he knows the rules how to play this game, that it's not allowed. He was just trying to sneak that by us.
Another thing in the bed and breakfast definition, it said that the operator, the owner, or the owner's agent is required to reside in the bed and breakfast establishment or on contiguous property. That is per South Dakota Codified Law 34-18-9.1. Who is going to live there?
Back to the point about the owner knowing what the rules and laws are. He posted his sign for this conditional use permit the last day of the 7 days before it could be posted. And of course, it was, in my opinion, strategically located back behind a snowbank. So unless you're driving by and looking for the sign, you wouldn't see it. And that's if you're driving way down the road. If you're driving the other way down the road, you don't even see it at all. So I think he was trying to hide the fact of what he was trying to do so everyone wouldn't be aware of it. The other item, and I think it's been addressed a little bit, is how is this going to be managed? I can't remember if Kevin said that there would be up to 18 people living there, if that would require 6 off-street parking or on-site parking. And he said no off-street parking on Slip Up Creek. I believe Weidenbach Street is also a public street.
It's a public street.
And so I can envision him with his party house parking cars back there as well.
On our lawns.
And then one thing on this thing about managing these places, I would anticipate that Childred would say it's not his responsibility for any bad activities that happen during what goes on at that house. I'm sure he's gonna have contracts in place for these people to read and abide by all the rules of the property, but they're gonna use this as a party house, and they're gonna be coming from the wedding venue over to this house, continuing doing whatever they're doing, and they're not gonna really pay attention to what's going on there. They could be loud and obnoxious after hours. And as far as it being a nuisance and how the nuisance item is going to be covered, every night for the last 4 weeks, I look out my bedroom window and there's these lights glaring at our house. They've never been shut off, the outside lights. So again, how are these things going to be managed? I would hope that all of you can consider what the neighbors are going to be saying here tonight and not allow this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Anyone else care to address this item? Step forward, state your name and address.
Ryan Bechtold, 47610 Slip Up Creek Road. Everyone else has talked really good, so I'm not going to say much here. 35 houses in this neighborhood. 33 of us signed a form showing a united front, thank you, against this. The 2 that did not sign, they're out of the state right now. 1 has been working in J Major. I haven't been able to get his signature. That's all I have.
Anyone else care to speak to this item?
My name is John Hagan. I'm at 47640 Slip Up Creek Road. If you look to the west of the red marked lot, I live right next door to it. This revolving door of strangers will become my new neighbor, and I am 100% opposed to that idea. It will have nothing but a negative impact. I've lived out here for 24 years. It's our home. This is our neighborhood. And if you consider it, I think they brought up most of the important stuff. So all I want to say is, the one thing I haven't heard anybody address yet is the sign. They're talking about putting a 4x8 rooms for rent sign out in the front yard of that property. And if I should choose to sell my property, what do you think a potential buyer is going to say when he drives by? He's going to say, "See you later." Absolutely horrible idea. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Linda Wegman, 47634 Sorrel Street. We're just up a block. They've done a great job of covering things, but, you know, this whole thing about, oh yeah, it's just going to be a bed and breakfast. If you've looked at his list of the different possibilities, and it is still being shown on his website, everything from church camps to wedding ceremonies, wedding reception packages. This is not a place to stay overnight for the barn. There's a ton of different things, and he is still advertising that they have 150 chairs available for the events. 150 chairs when you're only going to be allowed 18 people? That's not a bed and breakfast. Thank you.
Dwayne Wegman, 47634. That was my wife, Linda. Everyone's pretty much covered the same thing, and if you don't have a good idea about how we feel, you will before the night's over. Anyway, I would like to say one thing. The only thing that I would agree with is the name of the center, the Lookout. You better look out.
Anyone else care to address this item? State your name and address.
My name is Kylie Beck. I grew up at 47645 Sorrel Street, the property directly north to the address in question here today. We live in a society where laws and rules exist for a reason, and violating them comes with consequences. Specifically, Minnehaha County has rules and procedures in place when it comes to a building. For example, a person needs a building permit. That building permit must be approved. If you want something rezoned for a use that's different than its current zoning use, approval must occur before that land is rezoned. The approval process is not as simple, hey, here's what I want to do, and then it's approved and you can just go do it on your own. It requires submissions of plans and documents, followed by hearings for the board to approve or deny, like in the present matter. When someone's made numerous appearances in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the County Commission as a whole, since 2018, with various zoning and permit requests, it would appear that that individual is no stranger to the proper rules and procedures that are necessary or required to request a permit and zoning changes and how that approval process works. I would agree with Ms. Olivier here today that the intentions that were presented to this board here is not the intentions that have been presented to the community and presented through the email chains as well as the narrative here in the packet that was provided. When it comes to the approval of the lookout, it's abundantly clear that Mr. Childress did not navigate the proper channels of going through the commission, as no mention of this venture was known to the abutting neighbors until after complaints were made and a cease and desist letter was sent to him. Instead, the lookout began advertising as a wedding venue. This structure is a house with neighbors, with a yard, with swings in a residential area. This is not an appropriate wedding venue. It was only after he began advertising on social media and had a Kelloland News article write and discuss this newest venture did it appear that the Planning and Zoning Commission was even made aware of his endeavor. This is based on my understanding of calls that were made to the Planning and Zoning Commission and speaking with my parents. A planner from the Minnehaha County Planning and Zoning worked with Mr. Childress and appears to have advised him, again, based on the emails in tonight's agenda, that he should apply for a conditional use permit for the lookout once residents of the neighborhood were made aware of this venture and contacting the commission expressing their concern. Even today, when I was preparing my statement, the lookout is not advertised as a bed and breakfast. If you go to their website, it lists that some fun ideas for the rental of the lookout include, but is not limited to, rehearsal supper space, bachelorette pad, bachelor pad, many other wedding uses, church camp, couples retreat, graduation parties, family reunions, life celebrations, and also note that there are wedding ceremony and reception packages available. You can even add on up to 150 chairs, tables, a bar event license, and bartenders. According to this list of ideas, none of them seem like they would qualify as a bed and breakfast, and any event needing 150 chairs is most definitely not something that would qualify as a bed and breakfast. Again, 150 chairs with an 18-person maximum, that's 8.3 chairs per person. Completely unnecessary. In the written narrative provided in the packet for this meeting, the petitioner of the permit stated that they plan to hold special events. As staff has pointed out here, there's not an explicit definition for special events to guide the commissioners. It is of my opinion, and probably opinions of others, that does not allow the petitioner to come up with their own definition of what special events are and whether or not they should be approved. The staff report points out in several places concerning expressing concerns that the neighborhood tenants have expressed. These concerns include odors, noise, lighting, parking, and effect upon the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity for their uses already permitted. And I do believe the covenants that have been mentioned also address this point. The approval notes express significant concern with the number of individuals on the property and go so far as to suggest limiting the number of people on the property to avoid the aforementioned concerns. The approval notes identify 18 as the golden number of people that should be approved on the property at the time, but also does mention that the commission could find it appropriate to limit less than that. 18 people is 18 people too many for this permit. There is limited parking. There are homes within hundreds of yards. The property coined the lookout is a home. It's not a gathering place for a wedding, a graduation, or a funeral. The approval notes do not provide for limitation of noise or a placement of quiet hours, even though the approval notes seem to suggest concern of this being a noisy endeavor. It does not appear in any of the information or documents provided ahead of this hearing that the requirements of a bed and breakfast would be met. My understanding is that South Dakota codified law states that the operator or the owner or the owner's agent is required to reside in the bed and breakfast establishment or on contiguous property. Nowhere has it been made known or any mention that this requirement would be satisfied. I grew up and spent 20 plus years living in the house that is directly north of the structure in tonight's spotlight. When the Laurel Ridge wedding venue opened, the level of traffic in the area increased. The speed limit signs seemed to become a mere suggestion, and the hills in which vehicles fly over seem to only make drivers more reckless, not cautious. I recall my parents telling me they'd gone for a walk along Slip Up Creek last summer, maybe it was the summer before, and they told me that they found dozens of large handles of alcohol empty in the ditch. This was not something you would see 6 or 7 years ago. The quiet, calm neighborhood that I grew up in is changing, and change can be good, but in this case, it's not. This is a residential neighborhood, not meant to have a wedding venue or an Airbnb or bed and breakfast planted right in the middle. I am asking that this conditional use permit be denied. Rules and procedure exist for a reason. Someone should not be rewarded for trying to skirt around the requirements and apparently only seeking the proper channels once they were caught. By allowing this permit to be approved, it sets forth a precedent that anyone can go ahead and build or use a property for whatever reason they would like, and if they get caught, allowing them to then follow the proper rules and procedures without facing any repercussions. I'm also asking that you deny this conditional use permit because the use being sought for not only does not belong in the Andes Acres community, but it is not the use that it's being advertised as. If this conditional use permit is to be approved, I would ask for significant changes to the requirements to be made to include, but not limited to, specific noise times, contact information to be publicly available of the owner or owner's agent that is to reside on the property or contiguous to it. And I may be wrong, but last I knew, neither of the connecting house properties belonged to Mr. Childress. Having this contact information available in case there is an issue, a shielding of light and nuisance and unnecessary noise emanating from the property into the remainder of the neighborhood, a lower maximum capacity of tenants at any given time, and a very straightforward set of rules that must be followed, as well as a clear channel that can be taken for those that believe the bed and breakfast is not operating appropriately or within the scheme set forth in the permit, including methods and who to contact in regards to law enforcement. Thank you.
Anyone else care to address this item?
Zach with 47606 Slip Up Creek Road. I just wanted to talk about the noise. He had mentioned, the county guy there, law enforcement earlier. People who live in Sioux Falls are protected by a noise ordinance that starts at 11 p.m. We live out in the county. There's no noise ordinance. We're gonna call a deputy for a noise complaint. They're gonna laugh at us. There'll be nothing they can do about it. So it's grandmas aren't staying out there. My grandma gets done with a event, she goes home and goes to bed. We all know that. I mean, we've all been in our early 20s, you know, and gone to a wedding event, right? And partied afterwards. That's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be a loud party. You guys saw the front deck on that place. That's the first place I'd go, crank tunes and get drunk, right? That's what's gonna happen. Deputies ain't gonna be able to do anything, and our neighborhood's gonna be left to suffer. It's not a good idea. It's gonna be a nightmare. Thank you.
There's a lot of things that this community.
Please state your name
that
and address.
My name is Abigail Peterson. I am still a landowner south of Slip Up Creek Road. I live a half mile south of the lookout, which it is a lookout. When those lights are on in the front of those windows, I can see them from my back door. Since the inception of the idea of an event barn on Slip Up Creek, right, and my children have friends that live in Andes Acres. It's been pretty safe. But since that idea and the opening of Laurel Ridge, there has been select conversations that have happened. No, we will not have a liquor license. We won't have this and that and the other thing. 1 week after it was zoned and fine, it was in the news, liquor license, after someone said that they weren't going to do that. The parties go on until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. Like other people have said, it's a covenant, and the covenant says that can't be a rental house. Fine. The parties alone that will go from that venue and people walking over to that home, and that road is now 45 miles an hour. The landowner stopped me on my friend and my horses one day and said, "You'd realize that this would be 45 miles an hour." Well, yeah, I do. And is that gonna go down when somebody dies on Slip Up Creek Corner, driving drunk from their event center? Yeah, it might keep a couple people safe for one night that they stay there. People are probably not gonna stay there more than one night because they have events 3-4 days a week. And those are many different events, but this isn't something that's gonna be somebody who's going to be staying there for 1-2 nights, because they're going to have somebody else lined up, like they do in their event barn. Now, I don't live in Andy's Acres, though I own a large property near. I can still hear fireworks and partying and music late into the hours of the night, and I guarantee that that is going to carry over. Whether or not they have an event thing in that house, if I didn't live in Sioux Falls or in that area, I'd say, what's it to me? Because it doesn't affect me. It's somebody else's neighborhood that I don't really care about, and I don't have to deal with it. But I do know not everybody that lives in Andy's Acres, but I do know multiple families that have lived there most of their lives. Their parents live there. And it's obvious that this person, family, whatever, entity owns this property. They do not care about this neighborhood. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, anyone else care to address this item before I close the floor?
I'm Scott Zwak, 47646 Slip Up Creek Road. I'm right next door to the house we're talking about. Actually so close, my bedroom window's within 50 feet of it. And I'm gonna keep mine short because I think everybody's pretty much covered everything. But yeah, when the party barn down the road closes, where's everybody gonna go? You know, people haven't seen each other for years. Hey, we got the house right up the street here. Let's all go up there. And yeah, Mr. Childers said 10 o'clock was the closing time. Well, right here on the written narrative from the county, it says special events between 8 a.m. and midnight. Midnight. You know, that's on a Saturday night. I work Monday through Friday. You know, Saturdays and Sundays are my day, and I don't need the extra noise, the extra traffic there. One other thing, let's see here. Something in the report from the county, nuisance parties and late night noises have been a topic of discussion for other bed and breakfast establishments in the last few months. Well, right there, they're having problems with it now. You gonna allow them to bring that problem into our neighborhood? I hope not. Let's see. Oh, here, what, year and a half ago, Mr. Childers was approved for another venue down by his barn that he has now. You know what? Take your venue down there, keep it down there on the corner, away from a nice, quiet neighborhood. And then I guess the last thing I have is, would anybody here want this next door to them? I mean, as I said, 50 feet from my bedroom window is, well, less than 50 feet from my bedroom window is the driveway. And I would rather not have it there, so hopefully you all see everybody's opinion here, and thank you.
Okay, anyone else? You gonna make some more comments, Tyler? Wait a minute, somebody else.
Hello, my name's Stephen Bechtold. I live at 47614 Slip Up Creek Road. Could I ask your commissioners, how many of you, by show of hands, have stayed in B&B? Did the owner live there? No? Everyone I've stayed at, the owner has been there. You show up, you got wine and cheese maybe at 4:35. You wake up, they serve breakfast, and you leave. These people aren't even going to begin to be there until probably midnight when the barn closes. There is no sidewalk. The street actually is brand new, but it's very narrow. My wife tries to walk it, and she has to be very careful with cars, both from the motorcycle track and from the barn. The 35 mile an hour speed limit's a suggestion. When the trucks are going down there with the motorcycle trailers, they're doing 50, 60 miles an hour. No different with the patrons at the event center. They show up early to decorate and so on, that's fine. But when they leave, they've been overserved, even though he does not drink. He gets these event permits for liquor. Beer trucks go by there constantly. This is not a good fit. I urge you to deny the permit. Thank you.
Okay, any more opposition?
Yes, I'm Roger Lunstra, 47636 Sorrel Street. We not only live out there, we built a home out there in 1971, lived there since. We did own quite a few lots. We still own enough for 6 houses out there. We've kept those for view to the interstate and so on. But I think if you approve this application, you're going to take $50,000 to $100,000 off of every lot I own. It's just going to torpedo the value. So, and on this 18 people, 3 people per bedroom, they better be pretty well acquainted. So, you know, I don't think you should approve it. We have covenants that restrict it where they can't be approved. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Tyler, you want to make any further comments? State your name again.
Tyler, landowner here. Yes, a couple things, just want to go over quick points. I know the night's getting long here, so. Okay, first thing that they kind of mentioned was a covenant, and I got record of that covenant here about 4 o'clock today. Went over it with my attorney and kind of went over that. The covenant's from 1963. South Dakota has Supreme Court that says after 50 years, that covenant is no longer valid. There's multiple cases that says that. We've never used this. It's never been actively used for anybody. So if there's somebody that believes it's been used by us, previous owners had people staying there that had different last names and different stuff. But since we've owned it, no one stayed inside of it. 18 guests, obviously that limits special events. When we say special events, we're saying birthdays, small stuff, and we can modify the website. We can appease that. This is over half a mile away from the barn, so there's no way someone's going to walk from the barn up there, and that's from the top of the property. We personally paid over $50,000 to put above ground lines below ground, and we asked Alliance to lay fiber high-speed internet into that community. That was primarily due to us, so we're trying to better the environment as well. According to there was one thing that mentioned about the sign. The sign was placed. There were the county is the person who's taking care of the roads. The drifts are approximately 4.5 foot. We placed the sign in the proper place underneath that. We sent a picture of that to make sure the sign was up properly. The back of the north of the house has a large basketball. I mean, it's the size of half a basketball court. I mean, we probably have size for 8 to 9 cars on that lot, no problem. I want to be really clear too. This is not just for wedding guests. It's not just wedding clients. We see a bigger market in the Airbnb, VRBO, other markets. I mean, we have 1, maybe 2 clients that are interested from a wedding perspective. We also now have an in-house shuttle from the barn that shuttle people back and forth areas to get them safe. The county obviously is setting the ways to operate or restrictions, and that obviously dictates our package we had with the 150 chairs was to utilize part of the land at the barn and have overnight accommodations at the venue or at the house. There's been 0 infractions with South Dakota sales tax, with property tax, with liquor license, with police. We've never had any infractions or anything. If you have any additional further questions, I'd entertain the idea. I just want to be really clear that we're in the, if someone wanted to rent this 31 days, 15 days, 18 days, this is a subsect of a category that's down to, 3 days, 4 days. If this was rented to a normal person or a family, it could be rented today. I just want to be really clear that, with other houses and stuff, that we don't want to limit the property rights of both them and us. I just want to urge that, to think about if you own the property and you had people that you want to get them home safely from weddings. We've stayed multiple times at VRBOs, great experience. We rent 3 or 4 people at one time, see friends in there. I don't personally drink, so I don't handle that kind of stuff, but I think it's a safe environment, a nice new house, and it's well maintained. Any questions for me?
It's not at this time. Thank you.
Yep.
I believe I'm going to close the floor now. Commissioners?
Actually, Madam Chair, I did have one question. If Ms. Olivier would have any argument on the covenant. It sounds like we have a covenant in question now, with one side saying that has expired or anything. If she can speak to any of that.
Actually, I think we should address that to the county or the staffers, because I don't think that's something that we oversee at all. So
Okay.
that would be a legal thing is what they would do.
So, yeah, and maybe I can just skip ahead to where I'm going with that line of thought. I know and again, I think this has been helpful to have 2 instances of this, bed and breakfast, Airbnb, to kind of create the limits and the scope, because I think the other one was pretty classic, an Airbnb that's was fairly simple. And this one, I remember a couple months ago, at least a couple months ago, when Wall Lake was looking at this, one of the things this body advised was, and I think it might have actually been the full county commission, we advised that the neighborhood should take it upon itself to have a covenant, govern itself essentially, so that the county or city or this body doesn't need to get in and micromanage every single neighborhood. And so that's where I'm thinking that the covenant, I think, tends to make this one a little bit easier case on the other end of that spectrum, whereas previous tonight, I think we had a simpler case. So I guess just to let my colleagues know where I'm at, I'm kind of inclined to either deny or defer to get further information about this covenant. Scott, I don't know, I guess I can phrase that as a question for Scott, if the status of the covenant makes any difference to us.
So the county is not in the position of enforcing covenants. So that is a private agreement that they enter into when they buy that property. And covenants can cover a number of things: color, types of trees you plant, the colors of your house, the number of hours you can leave your garage door open. A lot of things that we just don't get into and don't want to regulate. So the county does not enforce deed restrictions, restrictive covenants, or the like. So whether they expire in 50 years, I'm not that familiar with state law, but I don't know if it's actually germane because we don't enforce them. But that's not to say they may not still have some kind of civil recourse, but it's not up to the county to enforce it. We would never be a party to them.
Thank you, Scott.
I guess I have a question too. They talked about the road in the back. I'm guessing that the wording would pertain to that road also for no parking?
It's a public right-of-way. It has never been a road has not been built into it, but it's an existing right-of-way. So there would be no parking allowed on Wiedenbach.
And I guess another question I would have, do all bed and breakfasts, are they allowed to have a signage or?
They are allowed, they are allowed to have a sign. They have to get a permit, a building permit or a sign permit, and the maximum size is 4 by 8, 32 square feet.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further comments?
I guess one thing I'd say before you guys really say anything is that as a bed and breakfast, I'm okay, but having the events, I'm kind of having a problem with. And I know, I don't think, that's the issue I'm having is the event part.
Yeah, I think that came out in further conversation. And again, I think that's why these two examples that we had tonight kind of create the end bounds of, as we're looking forward to modernizing this ordinance from a bed and breakfast to a true short-term rental, or to contemplate whether special events can be had or whatnot. I think this is a helpful case to continue to talk further as we go forward, but I'm just not seeing it as a fit tonight. So I think pending any further conversation, I'll be ready to make a motion to deny.
So instead of deny, can we defer to a later date? Just, I'm throwing that out there just because then I think there's so many days they have to wait to reapply, correct? 1 year.
6 months, sorry, 6 months.
Okay. That's the only reason why. I know in the past we've deferred stuff just so that maybe the neighbors can figure stuff out with the applicant.
I definitely appreciate that, especially as the new guy at the table helping me learn the ropes on some of the procedural aspects here. I'll look to some of my colleagues. I take that into consideration, but I'm still leaning towards denial, and we could pick this up in 6 months under a new ordinance potentially. But as it sits now, I'm not seeing the merits.
I would be with you on a denial motion, so if you want to know what one other person's feelings are, I can tell you that.
So just as a point of clarification, maybe Scott can correct me, but the petitioner has the right to appeal this as well, or decision denied. So should we deny it? It doesn't necessarily mean 6 months. He can appeal that decision and take it to a higher board. So just as a point of clarification too. So I guess maybe to piggyback where I'm going with that is, I guess I do agree. I think this is something that should be denied. If the petitioner wants to appeal it, that's his prerogative, I guess.
Madam Chair, I also feel like, we approved the last one. We've had a history of approving fairly basic bed and breakfasts. I think I agree with Lukey and others that say, the issue here is calling it an event center, because there's a whole bunch of extra baggage that's attached to what that might mean. And so our other option is to add a condition to the rest of those conditions that there shall be no event center or large events past the people that are actually residing that are registered into this facility for the bed and breakfast function. And then that lets them have small gatherings with just those people that are there, but nobody beyond that, that's registered in the bed and breakfast. So that might be an option for us if we want to be consistent with some of the other past findings that we've had.
Joe, you have a comment?
I appreciate that insight. I think that ship may have sailed on the sense of I think a clean denial, as Commissioner Paulson seems to be on board with, may give the space needed. I think this neighborhood might have to go back to the basics of, is there any accommodation? I'd kind of like to leave that to the neighborhood to come up with some of those if they come back in 6 months, a year, and have some accommodations that are reasonable like that I think you proffered something that's possible. I just don't think we're there right now, and I think we have plenty of basis for a denial as we sit now. So I'll get this moving. Move to deny.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to deny the conditional use permit 23-04. All those in favor of the denial?
Aye.
Opposed? The denial passes on the county side.
All right, on the city side, Commissioners, do I have a motion that somebody would like to make regarding this issue?
Can we make a denial motion? I think we've been instructed that we have to have a motion to approve and then can vote accordingly. So
Correct.
Your call,
Yes.
Chair.
Yes. So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
For
the
discussion, I'll make a motion
Yes.
for approval with the 9 conditions.
I'll second.
Further discussion before I
I'll
call.
just say, everybody kind of said the same thing. I think there's a lot of confusion on what event is and what a special event is. And so with that confusion, I don't think we should be approving, and I won't be, so.
Other comments? Okay.
I would just make a comment that even if we were all on board for approval, I would think just for the property owner and for the neighborhood to remain on good terms, there would be a lot of concessions or conditions that I think need to be mutually agreed upon before this is a successful business, a successful endeavor for the neighborhood and the owner. So I'll be in favor of a denial for right now, the way it stands.
All right, other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve the conditional use permit. Those in favor will say yes. Those opposed, please say no.
No.
All right, motion is denied, but on our side, that agrees with your side.
Okay? Any old business? Any new business? I'll consider a motion to adjourn on the county side.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn on the city side?
I'll make a
Motion
motion to
adjourned.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn,
All right, sounds good.
Aye.